The day I realized my $50,000 treasure was gone didn't start with panic. It started with dust. I was in the garage, reorganizing old storage bins along the back wall, the kind of slow weekend task you put off for months. Behind a stack of sealed containers sat a reinforced wooden chest. Dark oak, brass corners, heavy-duty padlock. Except, it wasn't there. At first, I thought I had moved it. The chest wasn't decorative. It wasn't sentimental clutter. Inside were rare gold coins and historical collectibles passed down from my grandfather, appraised just last year at just over $50,000. I never advertised that fact. Never bragged. Never mentioned the appraisal outside of one required disclosure form during a refinance process. And that's when something cold slid down my spine. Because the only outside entity that had requested documentation about valuable items affecting property insurance coverage was the HOA. Specifically, the HOA president. She had framed it as routine compliance. Just keeping community standards aligned, she'd said with that polished smile she wore at every board meeting. I told myself I was overthinking it until I checked the garage side door. No damage. No forced entry. Then I checked the security footage. That's when my stomach dropped. 3 days earlier, during work hours, the camera recorded someone entering my driveway. Not a stranger. Her. The HOA president. She wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize walked behind her. They weren't sneaking. They weren't rushing. They used a key. My garage key. I replayed it 3 times, hoping I was mistaken. But there she was, confidently unlocking my side door, stepping inside like she owned the place. They were inside for 22 minutes. They came out carrying something heavy between them. The wooden chest.
My chest.
My hands started shaking, not from fear, but from disbelief. I paused the footage on her face.
Calm.
Focused. Not nervous. That wasn't opportunistic theft. That was planned. I immediately checked my HOA portal online. And there it was. A maintenance notice filed the same day. Emergency compliance inspection due to suspected hazardous storage. Hazardous storage? Of what? Old coins? I scrolled further. There was a fine posted to my account. Unauthorized storage of undeclared high-value assets. Violation of community security policy. I stared at the screen. They had created a violation to justify entering my property. Except I had never signed any agreement allowing interior inspections. The HOA governed landscaping, paint colors, exterior structures. Not garages. Not personal property. Not locked chests. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Hello. Her voice came through smooth and composed. I assume you've checked your garage by now. My heart slowed. You broke into my property. Let's not use dramatic language, she replied calmly. The association has authority to address undeclared valuables that could pose community liability risks. By stealing them? They've been secured, she corrected, until we determine compliance. Compliance? Like she was holding contraband instead of heirlooms. You had no right. She sighed, almost bored. You signed the community bylaws when you purchased the property. No, I said evenly. I didn't. Silence. Then a shift in her tone. What do you mean? I'm not an HOA member. The pause that followed wasn't confusion. It was calculation. You're inside the subdivision. Yes. But my parcel was annexed before the HOA expansion. I opted out at closing. It's recorded with the county. Longer silence. Then softer. That's not how our records show it. I don't care what your records show. My voice was steady now. You entered my garage. You removed $50,000 worth of property. Without permission. Her confidence flickered. We'll review documentation. You'll return my chest, I said. Today.
She didn't agree.
She didn't apologize. She ended the call. That's when I realized something worse than theft had just happened. She hadn't acted impulsively. She acted like she believed she had power. And people who think they have power over you rarely stop at one line crossed.
She didn't return the chest. Not that day.
Not the next. Instead, I received an email from the HOA's official address. Subject line: Asset compliance review pending. Asset. Like my grandfather's collection was a misplaced lawn ornament. The email claimed the association had temporarily secured high-value items discovered during an emergency inspection prompted by community safety concerns. It referenced bylaws I had never seen and cited authority I had never granted. That was her strategy. Paper overreach. If you write something confidently enough, most people assume it's legitimate. But I don't assume. I verify. I pulled out my closing documents, the full purchase agreement from when I bought the house. Then the county parcel map. Then the recorded deed. There it was in black and white. My lot number sat just outside the legally defined HOA boundary expansion approved 5 years ago. The subdivision wrapped around my parcel like a horseshoe. But it never included me. I had specifically asked about it before closing. The seller had confirmed in writing, property not subject to HOA governance. I logged into the county recorder's website and downloaded the annexation filings. Page 47. Highlighted section. Parcel 18 be excluded per owner election. That was mine. So how did her records show otherwise? I drove to the county office the next morning and requested a certified copy of everything tied to my parcel: easements, covenants, restrictions, amendments. No HOA signature. No binding agreement. Nothing. On the drive home, I passed the community clubhouse. Through the glass windows, I could see her inside speaking animatedly to 2 board members. They looked tense. That told me something important. She hadn't told them everything. Back at home, I checked something else. My garage door lock. The key hadn't been forced, which meant one of 2 things. Either she somehow had a duplicate, or someone had given her one. I reviewed my maintenance history. 6 months ago, the HOA had organized a community security upgrade program. They offered free lock inspections to ensure compliance with neighborhood safety standards. I had declined, but a handyman had come by anyway, claiming to inspect exterior hinges for rust. I remembered now. He asked casually if the garage lock had ever been replaced. I said no. He nodded. Friendly. Unremarkable. My chest tightened. I pulled the original key from my drawer and compared it to the spare I kept hidden. Both were present, which meant a copy had been made at some point. Not stolen.
Duplicated.
That wasn't authority abuse. That was premeditation. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a board member, not her. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he began carefully. There hasn't, I replied. There was hesitation on his end. She said you were non-compliant with asset disclosure. I'm not even under your association. Silence. That's not what we were told. Of course it wasn't. Because if she admitted I wasn't a member, she'd also have to admit she had 0 jurisdiction over my property. And where exactly is my property right now? I asked. Another pause. It's being stored. Where? I'm not authorized to disclose that. I almost laughed. You're not authorized to disclose the location of my own belongings? He exhaled slowly. This is escalating. No, I said evenly. It already escalated when she walked into my garage. That afternoon, I sent a certified demand letter. Not angry, not emotional. Precise. It stated. I am not an HOA member. No covenant binds my property. A entry was unauthorized. Removal of contents constitutes theft. Immediate return required within 48 hours. I copied the entire board and the association's legal counsel. Because here's the thing about people who misuse authority. They rely on silence. They rely on hesitation. They rely on the assumption that you won't check the paperwork. But paperwork doesn't panic. Paperwork doesn't bluff. And paperwork doesn't lie. By evening, the HOA portal went offline. No access. No violation notice. No asset compliance page. Just a blank error screen. That told me something else. She was scrambling. Because if I wasn't in the HOA, then she hadn't secured an undeclared asset. She had coordinated a break-in. And that's not a policy dispute. That's a criminal offense. The chest came back on the third day. Not delivered. Not returned with apology.
Dropped.
At 6:12 a.m., my doorbell camera buzzed with a motion alert. I opened the app and saw the wooden chest sitting on my porch. Alone. No note. No knock. Just placed there like an overdue package someone hoped I wouldn't question. I stepped outside carefully. The padlock was different. Mine had been brass. This one was silver.
New. Cheap.
My pulse slowed in that dangerous way it does when anger becomes controlled. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I pulled up the camera footage from earlier that morning. There she was again. The HOA president. Wearing sunglasses. Car parked 2 houses down. She and the same man from before carried the chest to my porch. They set it down quickly. No eye contact with the camera. They knew it was there. And that was her mistake. Because returning something quietly doesn't erase taking it. It confirms it. I recorded everything to an external drive. Multiple copies. Cloud backup. Then I called the police. Not the non-emergency line. The main line. When the officer arrived, I showed him the original footage of her entering my garage. The removal of the chest. The return footage. My deed showing no HOA authority. My certified demand letter. He watched it all in silence. "That's her?" he asked. "Yes." He glanced at the chest. "You want to open it now?" "Not yet," I said. We photographed it first. Documented the new lock. Logged the time. Chain of custody matters when someone thinks they can outmaneuver you. Only after everything was recorded did I cut the lock. The lid creaked open. Inside were the velvet coin cases. Stacked neatly. Too neatly. I lifted the first tray. Empty. Second tray. Empty. Third. Empty. My throat tightened, but my voice didn't shake. "They swapped it," I said quietly. The officer leaned closer. "Swapped what?" I pulled out one of the coins. At least, what looked like one. Gold color. Correct size. Correct year stamped. But lighter. Wrong edge milling. Replica. Every single rare coin had been replaced with high-quality fakes. That wasn't panic theft. That was planned extraction. She hadn't just taken my treasure. She had intended to keep it. The officer's expression changed. "This just moved up," he said. I nodded. Because now this wasn't about HOA overreach. This was felony-level theft. Over $50,000 in collectible currency. With video evidence tying her directly to entry and removal. And now, attempted concealment. He asked the question I was waiting for. "Do you know where the originals might be?" I did. Because there was only one place she would feel safe storing something she believed she controlled. The HOA clubhouse. Specifically, the locked office she treated like a personal command center. Later that afternoon, I received a voicemail from her. Her tone was different. Controlled but strained. "You've made your point. The association has decided to close this matter." "Close it?" Like it was a noise complaint. "You should reconsider escalating this," she added. "These situations can become complicated." There it was. A warning disguised as advice. I didn't call back. Instead, I forwarded the evidence package directly to a property crimes detective. Not just the local patrol unit. A detective. With jurisdiction. And subpoenas. Because here's what she didn't understand. Power works in layers. She operated inside a small one, board meetings, bylaws, neighborhood influence. But she stepped into a bigger one. Law enforcement. Financial crimes. Fraud investigations. And once that machine starts moving, it doesn't stop because someone feels embarrassed. That evening, 2 unmarked vehicles parked outside the clubhouse. Lights off. Engines idling. I watched from across the street. An hour later, they walked out carrying a sealed evidence bag. Inside it, I could see the edge of a familiar velvet coin case. She thought she could intimidate me. She thought returning the empty chest would scare me into silence. But she made one fatal mistake. She assumed I would treat this like a neighborhood dispute. It wasn't. It was theft. And now, it was on record. The search warrant was executed the next morning. Quietly. No sirens. No spectacle. Just two detectives, a uniformed officer, and a locksmith standing outside the HOA clubhouse at 8:03 a.m. By 8:07, they were inside. I wasn't allowed to enter, but I didn't need to. I watched from across the street as board members began arriving one by one, confused, then alarmed. She showed up last.
Of course she did.
Her SUV pulled in fast. She stepped out already holding her phone, already speaking loudly, already trying to control the narrative. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded as she approached the entrance. One of the detectives calmly presented the warrant. She read it, and, for the first time since this started, she looked uncertain. The warrant wasn't vague. It specified unauthorized entry into private property, removal of valuables exceeding $50,000, evidence of replacement with counterfeit items, potential financial fraud. Her name was printed clearly in the document, not as HOA president, as an individual. That distinction matters. Board authority doesn't shield personal criminal liability. Inside, they went straight to her office, the one she kept locked, the one no other board member was allowed to enter without her present. 20 minutes later, they emerged with 3 sealed evidence containers, then a 4th, and then something else. A safe, portable, digital keypad, removed entirely. The board members standing outside looked stunned. One of them turned to me from across the street, disbelief written across his face. "I didn't know," he mouthed silently. I believed him, because this wasn't an overzealous policy enforcement. This was personal. The detective approached me shortly after. "We recovered multiple coin sets matching your description," he said. "Initial inspection suggests authenticity." My chest tightened, not from anxiety this time, from confirmation. She hadn't even tried to move them far. She thought proximity meant control, that her title insulated her. It doesn't. By afternoon, word had spread through the neighborhood. Group chats lit up. Emails circulated. Speculation ran wild. But facts travel faster when they're documented. By 3 p.m., the HOA portal displayed a simple message: board operations temporarily suspended pending review. Translation: damage control. Around 5 p.m., she was escorted out of the clubhouse. Not handcuffed, but not in control either. Her posture was different now. Rigid. Defensive. She avoided eye contact. The same neighbors who once nodded respectfully at her now watched in silence. Power evaporates quickly when exposed. Later that evening, the detective called again. "They weren't just yours," he said. "What do you mean?" "There were other valuables in that safe. Jewelry.
Cash.
Documents." My mind shifted. How many? Still cataloging, but enough to suggest a pattern. That's when it became clear. I wasn't the first. I was the one who had cameras, the one who checked paperwork, the one who pushed back fast enough to catch her before she could adjust. The investigation expanded immediately. Financial records, board expense accounts, maintenance contractor payments, and something even more damaging: emails. Internal communications showed she had personally directed inspections of select properties, always citing vague compliance concerns, always targeting homeowners who traveled frequently, always framing it as community protection. Protection. The word she used when she called me. But protection requires consent. What she exercised was access. And access, without permission, is intrusion. By nightfall, her resignation letter circulated. Effective immediately. No explanation. No apology. Just departure. But resigning from a board doesn't end an investigation. It just removes the badge. The next morning, detectives returned, this time to her house. Neighbors watched again. Different street. Same silence. By then, the story wasn't about an HOA dispute. It was about systematic abuse of authority. She built her power on assumption. Assuming homeowners wouldn't verify bylaws. Assuming no one would question inspections. Assuming small thefts wouldn't be noticed. But greed scales. And scale attracts attention. When you steal once and get away with it, you become bold. When you steal repeatedly, you become predictable. And predictable criminals leave trails. By the end of the week, formal charges were filed. Not because I yelled, not because I threatened, but because I documented. She thought she was untouchable inside her little jurisdiction. What she forgot is simple. HOA authority stops at policy. Criminal law doesn't. The charges became public on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, her name was everywhere. Not just in neighborhood emails. County records. Local news site. Court docket. 3 felony counts. Burglary. Grand theft exceeding $50,000. Fraudulent misrepresentation. And that was only from my case. As investigators continued reviewing the safe's contents, 2 more homeowners stepped forward. Jewelry missing after inspection. Cash envelopes gone after compliance checks. Both had dismissed it at the time. Assumed they misplaced things. Assumed no one with a title would risk that much. Titles are powerful disguises. Until they aren't. My coins were returned officially through evidence release. I signed paperwork at the station, verified serial numbers against the appraisal documentation, and placed them back into my possession, this time into a bank vault, not the garage. Trust is expensive once broken. The detective asked me something before I left. You ever think about how close she came to getting away with it? I did. If I hadn't checked the camera that day, if I had believed the compliance email, if I had opened the chest immediately without documenting it, if I had treated it like a board dispute instead of a crime, she would have kept everything. And probably continued. The HOA board dissolved temporarily. An interim management company took over operations while the remaining members cooperated with investigators. The neighborhood felt different. Quieter. Less performative. For years, she had positioned herself as the guardian of standards. The one protecting property values. The one enforcing rules. But enforcement without accountability eventually turns inward. During the preliminary hearing, I saw her again. No sunglasses. No clipboard. No confident posture. Just a defendant seated beside a public defender.
She didn't look at me.
Not once. Because confrontation is easy when you believe you control the outcome. It's much harder when evidence controls it for you. Her attorney attempted to argue misunderstanding of jurisdiction. Claimed she believed HOA bylaws allowed temporary seizure of undeclared assets. The judge asked a simple question. Show me where it authorizes entry into a locked private garage. There was no answer.
Because it didn't exist.
The counterfeit coins became a critical detail. Intent to permanently deprive. That phrase carries weight in court. You don't replace something with replicas unless you plan to keep the original. And planning eliminates accident. Eventually, a plea deal was reached. Reduced sentencing in exchange for full restitution disclosure and cooperation in identifying any additional affected homeowners. She avoided prison time, probation, heavy fines, restitution payments, permanent removal from any HOA leadership role. But the real consequence wasn't the sentence. It was exposure. Her reputation, the foundation of her influence, dissolved overnight. In neighborhoods like ours, reputation is currency. And once devalued, it doesn't recover. Months later, I stood in my garage again. The wall where the chest once sat was empty. Intentionally, I didn't move it back there. Instead, I installed upgraded cameras, smart locks, and something more important than security equipment. Boundaries. Clear ones. Legal ones. Documented ones. This story was never about revenge. I didn't destroy her life. She did that herself the moment she confused access with ownership, authority with entitlement, position with permission. All I did was refuse to stay quiet. When someone with power tests you, they're gambling on your hesitation, on your doubt, on your desire to avoid conflict. But accountability isn't destruction. It's correction. She stole $50,000 worth of treasure. What she lost was far more valuable.
Trust.
And trust, unlike coins, isn't easily replaced with a counterfeit.